Hey, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to walk you through the installation of a 15 amp Powerlet so you can power a city block in the event of a rolling blackout. All kidding aside, the 2.4 amp or whatever it is up front on my BMW R1250 GS Adventure is embarrassing. It barely maintains the phone charge when I'm running multiple trackers, Google Maps, and jamming out to my favorite tunes, let alone charging my DSLR, drone batteries, and my GoPro batteries. Now, the BMW does have two other power sources, one Powerlet which is located below the seat, and then this SAE connector. These are not reasonable points at which to connect my tank bag though. After much research and investigation, I figured out how to power a 15 amp Powerlet which is activated off the bike being on and off. If you have a different bike or looking to install in a vehicle, you will be able to use the same technique to adapt to your project, but we'll have to use a different trigger source than I use in this video. You never want to power straight off the battery because as soon as you forget to unplug the device, when you shut off the bike, you will be greeted with a bike that no longer has electric start. That is why we use a relay that is triggered off something else that powers up when your bike turns on. So to get started, you're going to need to buy a few items, all of which I included links below so you can easily acquire the items. If you choose to purchase the items with the affiliate links below, you will be supporting the channel as I may receive a portion of the sale. So first, you'll need a bracket to hold the Powerlet. I personally made mine. If this is something you'd like me to make a video on, leave a comment below. You'll need a 30 amp 12 volt DC waterproof relay with harness, 15 amp fuses, inline fuse holder, BMW wire harness, red wire, black wire, waterproof butt connectors, and the Powerlet. The tools you'll need to complete this project are wire cutters, strippers, and crimps, and a voltmeter. For the installation, remove the seats and empty out your junk drawer underneath your back seat. Now it is time to start running wires, so I started with the relay trigger wires first. I used yellow wires because this is what I had available. They're both the same color, but I marked on the ends which was which. It would be better to use two different colors, but man, wire has gotten really expensive, and the single color will work. If you use the same color, mark both ends of the wire with a unique identifier, such as a 1 on the first wire and 2 on the second wire, or a positive on one wire and a negative on the other wire. I run the yellow wire from the back compartment, down the frame on the battery side, and then under the fuel tank. I then routed them up through an opening near the radiator because the connection I had to make is on the right hand side of the bike inside the fairing. Do not crimp any of the butt connectors on the wires at this point. You have to do some testing to figure out which is the positive and negative for the trigger connection point. So trace the wire going through the stock GPS mount down to the connection point. One side of the plug will be black and the other side will be white. At this point, you will have to remove the white plug and install the wire harness repair plug that you bought, which has 3 wires. You then strip a little bit of the plastic cover from each of the wires and using the voltmeter determine which is the positive and negative. To do this, I turned on the bike and touched the red probe to one of the 3 wires. Then touched the black probe to each of the other 2 wires. Whichever 2 wires gave me the positive 12 volt reading are the 2 wires I'll be working with. Now, if the value is negative, simply switch the wires. When you have the positive values, whichever wire is touching the red probe is the positive, and whichever touching the black probe is the negative. Mark these wires either by using tape or a permanent marker so you can tell which is which. At this point, you will install the waterproof butt connectors. When I do this, I use a lighter. Before you light any open flame though, check your surroundings. Your fuel tank lid should be securely shut and you should not smell any gas fumes. You also want to be careful when you are working. You don't want to damage any of the other wires or details on the bike. So keep your wires and connectors away from anything else that should not be exposed to heat. After you have connected the 2 yellow wires to the positive and negative wires on the connector, it is time to connect the yellow wires to the relay. The relay has 4 wires. 2 are the power wires and 2 are for the trigger. The trigger is what closes the connection when the bike turns on, completing the circuit and providing the power to the Powerlet. Then when the bike is turned off, the circuit is broken and the power to the Powerlet is turned off. This functionality is what keeps you from having a dead battery. The next thing I did was remove the battery. Whenever I am working on electrical, I always disconnect the battery. That way, if you accidentally cross the wrong wires during assembly, you don't damage the bike. During this process, I also use the tools that I regularly carry on the bike. If I need a tool I don't normally carry, then I consider adding it to my tool bag. That way I know I have the tools to work on the bike if I'm 100 miles out in the desert far from civilization. Use your T25 Torx bit to remove the battery cover. There is a single bolt holding the battery cover. Then there are 2 points which are secured via grommets. As usual, I always try to put the bolts back in the holes in which they came out of. I find that it's easier to keep them straight versus trying to figure out which ones go where at the rebuild state of the project. Next, we need to remove the band securing the battery. So you pull down on the Y section of the band and unhook. You then pull up on this cover at this point, and then the cover comes right off. Then you remove the battery and set aside. You then need to run the main power wires. I used red for positive and black for negative. You will see that the positive runs from the battery toward the back of the bike to connect to the relay. The red positive fused wire from the battery connects to the fused wire on the relay according to this drawing. Make sure that you have a 15 amp fuse in this circuit to protect your bike in the event of a short circuit. The Powerlet I used was a 15 amp Powerlet, so that is the fuse I used, and I never had a blown fuse. I then ran another red wire from the device wire on the relay down the frame of the bike, under the fuel tank, and along the frame, ultimately up to the Powerlet. I then ran a ground wire from the Powerlet to the battery. After you have run all the wires, double check your work. Make sure that the appropriate wires are connected to the correct wires on the relay, and that the positive wire from the trigger point from the GPS power source is connected to the positive trigger source on the relay. The negative point from the GPS plug should be connected to the ground on the relay. After you've double checked your work, install the battery with the positive and negative wires that you've run connected to the appropriate terminals on the battery. Now for the moment of truth, turn on the bike. Plug something in the Powerlet and you should have power. If you don't have power, double check that you have a fuse in the fuse holder and that it is not blown. Now go ride and enjoy the power to charge all your electronics. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe and give the video a thumbs up to support the channel.